Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute or two. Right now, we're letting everybody populate the room. If you can, let us know what county you're from. You can enter that into the chat box, and just so we know where our audience is coming from. And we'll get started in just a minute or two. Looks like we've got folks from extreme North Florida, extreme South Florida, and most places in between. This is
Yeah,
great.
very cool.
Yeah, good representation.
Mm-hmm.
I think Long Key is the furthest one we've seen so far down in Monroe County.
Cool.
Furthest south, anyway. All right, it looks like most people have entered the room. Things have slowed down a little bit. We'll go ahead and get started in an effort to respect your time. Good morning. I'm Tom Wickman, the Assistant Director of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, and I'd like to welcome you to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Professional Webinar Series. Today's webinar is Florida Friendly Seascapes, Living Shorelines for a Sustainable and Resilient Coastal Florida with Dr. Vincent Encomio. Your microphones have been muted, and we'll be closing the chat feature early on in the presentation, so please put any questions that you have during the presentation into the Q&A box, and we'll take them at the end of the presentation. This webinar is approved for one FFLCP, LIAF, FDAX LF, LCLM, LLO, and CLO, DBPR, LA or CAM, and one FNGLA CEU. There's a $15 administration fee to receive a certificate for continuing education. I'll put a link in the chat box to make payment for the certificate if you've not already done so. We'll submit for the CEUs to the licensing agency on Friday, so make sure if you want the CEU to make your payment by the end of the day. This is part of a monthly webinar series held on the second Tuesday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We do have a special bonus webinar scheduled for Wednesday, February 19th. That's next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern with Christina McGinnis providing details on the UF Soil Test Kit powered by Soil Kit. There'll be a link in the chat also to be able to register for that. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be March 11th with Dr. Lennar Layton talking about new UF perennial peanut varieties. Also, you'll see a survey invitation pop up. Please take a moment to fill this out as it really helps us determine what topics you're interested in and what we should be scheduling for the upcoming year. With that, I want to thank you for joining us, and I will turn the floor over to Mark Celestin so he can introduce our presenter.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Mark Celestin, and I am the training coordinator for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, and we are thrilled to have every one of you all join us today. Today, I'm going to introduce our guest, Dr. Vincent Encomio. Dr. Vincent Encomio is a Florida Sea Grant multi-county extension agent serving Martin and St. Lucie counties with multiple years at UF IFAS. His work focuses on coastal health, habitat restoration, and water quality. He collaborates with stakeholders to restore estuaries, habitats through living shorelines and supports county stormwater education programs, particularly in addressing harmful algal blooms. Additionally, he provides guidance to local shellfish producers and contributes to restoration aquaculture projects. Originally from Turlock, California, Dr. Vincent grew up in one of the nation's major agricultural regions, raising poultry on his father's ranch. His passion for marine science and biology developed later, leading him to extension work, where he now bridges his agricultural roots with coastal and environmental stewardship. Inspired by the ability and adaptability of both nature and humanity, Vincent admires marine biologist Ed Ricketts, whose work influenced authors like John Steinbeck. An avid surfer and diver, he believed in the power of personal connection with the ocean, encouraging others to appreciate and protect coastal environments. Through his work, Dr. Encomio hopes to inspire communities to embrace sustainable, nature-based solutions that enhance both their lives and local waters. His goal is to foster a deep appreciation for coastal ecosystems and motivate others to actively contribute to their long-term health and resilience. With that, I present to you Dr. Vincent Encomio.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. Thank you so much, and thank you, Tom and Becky, for having me here and hosting the FFL webinar. I'd also like to give a shout out to Jennifer Marvin, who I wouldn't be here actually without her. We met last year at one of our extension conferences, just by chance, sitting together and having breakfast or lunch, I believe, and got to talking, and I'm here as a result of that. So I appreciate that, and I thank everybody for tuning in. Again, the title of my talk is Florida Friendly Seascape. So that's what I'm hoping to, if you don't already or aren't already familiar with living shorelines, I'm hoping that this is a brief introduction to it, and also seeing the connections between what you all do in the Florida Friendly Landscape Program, seeing how the work that you're already doing connects with the work of other professionals that are doing work on our coastal seascapes, so to speak. So I'm going to start off with kind of the backdrop of why we do what we do. And first of all, I'm curious to how many people are familiar with the term living shorelines. If you are, just go ahead and I don't know, what you could do is put a reaction in the chat, or I'm very curious how many people are familiar with that term, living shorelines. I have a feeling that there might be quite a bit of you, but also maybe some people that maybe you've heard of the term and are not fully familiar with it, or have not heard of it at all. But the idea of living shorelines, which I'll get into in a few slides, really comes about because of the way we have developed our coastlines. And so we have this legacy of shoreline hardening. Currently, and this is a study, I believe this was published in 2018 or 19, where they've estimated about 14% of our shoreline in the US is hardened, meaning we protect those shorelines through the use of hard, or what we call gray infrastructure, such as seawalls, bulkheads, and things of that nature. About 14% of our shoreline is hardened. And you can, if you train your eye towards Florida, on the right side of the image of the US, you can see Florida's got the percentage is actually quite high. You can use that color diagram on the right to show the percentage of hardened shoreline. That really red blip right there, and that's by county. That very red area there, that's Broward County. So almost, and if you're from Broward County, you know most of it is, there's canals and seawalls, and that's what that coastline is like. But the 2/3 of that hardening is on our South Atlantic and Gulf coasts. And at the rates that shorelines are being protected in that way, say through seawalls and bulkheads, an estimated 1/3 of all the US coastline would be armored by 2100. And the reason why that can be a concern is hopefully demonstrated by this diagram here, is when before a shoreline gets hardened, a natural shoreline, we have rising seas, even if it's an extreme high tide, that would be maybe a normal phenomenon during the course of a year. And as we know that our sea levels are rising over the years, that shoreline could migrate. The vegetation and the habitats that are associated with that shoreline can move further in, as shown in that middle diagram. But when you build a seawall, and it's typically right at that high tide line, you do not allow for that flexibility that's part and parcel of our coastlines. They move over time, and that does create some issues, which I'll show in a little bit. But you have reduced the ability of that shoreline to basically be resilient to changing conditions. So it's what we call coastal squeeze. So if there's any coastal habitats that are on either side of that bulkhead or seawall, they either won't move further inland, or they're getting drowned by those rising seas. And those rising seas are it's a real thing. It's happening. We've had 8 inches of sea level rise since around the turn of the 20th century. And 5 of those inches have been since the 19 in the 20th century. 3 of those inches since 1993. So that's a rapid, this is global change in sea level. And 8 inches, 3 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but if you average that out across the entire planet, and recognize that there's certain areas where it's those average rates of sea level rise are much higher than the global average. And we're starting to see that every year now in Florida with our king tides. So the king tides are higher than they normally have been historically, especially going back to the last 30 years. They are persisting longer, and that's because our average sea levels are increasing. So when we do get those natural phenomena like king tides, they are more extreme. If anybody can recall, I should have included it with this presentation. I show this image. I think it was published by the Miami Herald, where it shows a parking garage with an octopus swimming in it, and that was all because of king tides and compounded by sea level rise. And with these rising sea levels, we are areas that were not in coastal flood zones are, and we are still continuing to build new homes. And this is the estimate of homes built between 2010 and 2016. How much of the value of those homes, or who's got the most homes that will be at risk in these new changing coastal flood zones. So we're number 3, right behind New Jersey and North Carolina, with a total value of those homes of those 3 states creeping up on probably $10 billion. This is not a up-to-date estimate. I think this graphic was produced in 2018. So it's changing. And we recognize that the work that I'm doing with other professionals within IFAS and Florida Sea Grant and colleagues throughout the country are recognizing that this is an issue. And one of the things that we are trying to promote is this idea of living shorelines, and the idea that instead of utilizing hard structure or gray infrastructure to stabilize our shorelines, that we look back at how nature does it and try to replicate that function. And the idea is that by using natural habitats, you're reinstating that flexibility, and increasing the resiliency of that strip of coast to storms and sea level rise. While the added value is that because you're restoring habitats, native natural habitats to our coastal zone, you're also enhancing biodiversity and ecological function in these locations. And maintaining that connection between land and water, that's lost when you abruptly cut that off with the seawall or bulkhead. So a lot of the ecological productivity on our coastlines is at that interface between land and water, our intertidal zone. And then ideally, that would also improve water quality. That stormwater runoff that's coming from land to sea will, any excess nutrients or sediment will get trapped by vegetation that is on that coastal fringe. Things like, if you're in an estuary where there's brackish water, if you have oysters growing there, they can also help filter the water. So the idea of living shorelines really is a nature-based solution, and that's a term that's being used a lot in marine science and coastal sciences, taking a nature-based approach to shoreline stabilization to increase the resiliency of that coastal fringe, because we know that seawalls, it causes that coastal squeeze. It's a fixed location. It makes that patch of coastline less resilient to sea level rise because the coast can't move. You've lost habitat. And ultimately what happens, seawalls do fail. They've got a lifespan of maybe 20 to 30 years. You will have erosion at the base and sometimes behind. The graphic on the top right shows how that can be, seawall could be undercut from not only at the base, but from behind as sea levels or waves overtop those structures. That can cause failure, and with increasing rising sea levels and frequency of storms, that'll hasten that erosive process. And then you're looking at a very costly repair or replacement. Could be anywhere between $100 to $200 per linear foot. So if you've got a 100-foot shoreline, you can do the math and realize that's a very expensive prospect there. And it's not a either or solution, and we recognize that, and it's probably not realistic to completely remove a seawall or a hardened structure. Although there are cases of that, there are examples of that. That we work with a professional in the Tampa Bay area where he has removed failing seawalls and replaced it with a living shoreline, and they've done quite well. But there is really a gradient from green to gray when we're talking about living shorelines. You can have just only vegetation. You can all the way to building small breakwaters that will serve as habitat to help protect those plantings that you might do in that intertidal zone. And just to even expand upon that there's even more nuance. On the left-hand side, you see a range of those nature-based living shorelines where you're fully using natural elements, plants, maybe some fiber logs that help stabilize that shoreline. Some plantings can be done within those fiber logs, natural materials to encourage oyster settlement so that it over time creates a self-sustaining oyster reef, whether that be from rocks or oyster shell or coquina rock. Those are what we're classifying as nature-based living shorelines. But on the right, you can see that there are hybrid options as well. If there's an existing seawall or bulkhead, perhaps there's opportunities to install nature-based elements around that structure. And if you have things like oyster reef breakwaters offshore, or you can see at the bottom here this coquina structure where they've built an outcropping from that seawall and filled it, and then installed plantings within that filled structure. What the hope there is that over time, as those nature-based elements start to grow and be self-sustaining, ideally they'll render that seawall obsolete, so that it's not the main protection. I always describe it this way: is the seawall is your armor, right? But these nature-based elements can be your shields, right? and that additional protection be either before water reaches that seawall, or ideally those elements work in concert together to where the water barely even gets to that seawall. And a good example of that is shown here. This is in Lake Worth Lagoon. It's a great example of this hybrid type living shoreline where they've built these coquina rock structures, filled them, and some of them were planted with marsh grass or likely Spartina alterniflora, but in this case, they've been planted with red mangroves. And they provide that extra bit of protection, at least for in that vicinity or the area of influence of that structure. And this is a smaller version of it. There are much larger versions of that in Lake Worth Lagoon. So if you've been around Palm Beach County along the waterfront, you'll see examples of this. And they've actually done some really amazing work in Palm Beach County in Lake Worth Lagoon with living shorelines, these very large scales. They've even created islands because historically, this goes way back, they've had dredge holes that they've used the material for other purposes really degraded a lot of their shallow water habitats. So when you have these deep holes in areas that were once shallow, a lot of the times they just were not functional ecologically. They could get the water quality was really bad. They can get hypoxic or low oxygen or even no oxygen. So back in the early 2000s, they started to redress that by filling those in and building islands along over those footprints. And so what has happened over since then, all the way to not too long ago, 2018, they've had 3 phases of the Snook, what they were calling the Snook Islands project in Lake Worth Lagoon. They built multiple islands, about 6 islands, 11 acres of mangroves, almost 3 acres of Spartina marsh. And a lot of that Spartina alterniflora marsh will also help facilitate recruitment of mangroves as well, which really are at least for South Florida, really are the most protective natural feature along our protected shorelines, our estuarine and lagoon-based shorelines, and quite a bit of oyster reef as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale with those aerial photographs. And there's some, so Tom, am I able to, or can we provide this presentation to the attendees or Becky later on? I can, if that can be sent out, then you can have access to some of these.
Dr. Encomio, we will be posting this presentation to the FFL website. So anytime someone wants to view it again or share it with someone else, it'll be a week, one to 2 weeks before it gets posted to the FFL website. But we do archive all of these presentations to the website.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So another example of a large-scale living shoreline is in the Panhandle. If you're from that neck of the woods, you might already know about this project. It's along the downtown Pensacola waterfront. Again, well, it started earlier than Snook Islands. It was completed in 2003, and that just gives you some of the numbers. Quite a bit of oyster reef and salt marsh habitats were created, total of 15 acres of habitat restoration. And it's notable for its recovery after 2 pretty major hurricanes, Ivan and Sally. And so it's still going strong there. I don't know if how many phases were in between 2003 and 9, but it's been quite a self-sustaining project there, and adding a lot of value, not only visually but recreationally as well. And that resilience of these kinds of projects really has gotten some recent notoriety in Florida in Cedar Key with Hurricane Idalia. This is, of course, they had another hurricane after that. And this is a recent study put out by Savannah Berry who's at the Nature Coast Biological Station in Cedar Key, IFAS. And what is shown there is a couple before and after pictures of right before Idalia and not too long after Idalia. The top is before, the bottom is after. And visually, I hope that convinces you that there really isn't much of a difference there. So this recovered quite quickly after Idalia's passing. And one of the things that they had done prior to Idalia's passing, they had installed some wave gauges, some homemade wave gauges that they were able to construct with a graduate student, with probably a team of students, with Savannah Berry and Mark Clark. And the orange numbers here are the incident wave energy. This is comparing the area where the living shoreline was installed. And next to it, on the other side of this dock, was an area where there wasn't a living shoreline. It's just left for the most part alone. And you can see that dock right here in the distance. So that's this area here. And the gold numbers in percentages are the amount of wave attenuation. So the higher the number, the greater the amount the wave energy was reduced. And they had wave gauges before in the water, prior to in the deeper water, prior to waves reaching living shoreline, embedded within the living shoreline, and behind, or well, right around here. So what is this is showing that the living shoreline reduced wave energies up to 15 to 20% compared to the area that did not have a living shoreline. And they just recently published those findings. And these are great examples of how these public projects and reasonably large scale, the Cedar Key, there's multiple living shorelines within Cedar Key, but it's still what I would call a reasonably, large scale, and certainly not at the scale of Project Green Shores and Snook Islands. But it is a great example of how these public projects can increase the resiliency to events like hurricanes. But and there's some obvious benefits there for protecting the road, which was probably the primary objective of these living shoreline projects, at least at Cedar Key. But what about private properties, these single family residences? That's really where a lot of the extension work I'm doing is hoping to create some impact there and get people to change. But it's really tough, and there's different perceptions that drive these barriers to adopting living shorelines at that residential level. So that it's related to beliefs, sort of passed on from one neighbor to the next, or from where they're coming from. So we know that, in Florida, we get a lot of people coming from other areas. They bring those perceptions with them. So there's a belief that armory may be more effective, or just lack of information. There just isn't enough information. They don't know about living shorelines or nature-based solutions. And then and I have experienced this myself. They are influenced by their neighbors, by what other people have done. And we're really at the science of living shorelines, especially when it comes to the engineering aspects and the physical oceanography, related to living shorelines and how they physically protect the shoreline. A lot of that is still fairly new science, and so people are familiar. They may not think that living shorelines are a tried and true tested approach. They're familiar with shoreline hardening. They're influenced by their neighbors on what they've done, and influenced by their contractors as well. And so we have these very persistent barriers to achieving that sort of sweet spot, or what we're calling here our living shoreline nirvana of where waterfront homeowners, contractors, the regulatory agencies that are permitting these kinds of projects, where everybody's on the same page and we all are speaking the same language. So to get to that point, in 2019, Florida Sea Grant, FWC was really the initiator of creating, along with other partners, DEP, and a number of NGOs, is creating this Living Shorelines for Marine Contractors training course. And the modules are shown here just to give you an idea of the different topics that are covered. It's a 2-day course where we go over all the ins and outs related to living shorelines from the professional perspective, the types of designs, all those, the hybrid and nature-based options that I showed earlier, how to do site assessments, and doing some table exercises, group table exercises on design, permitting. So we devote a lot to permitting because that is one of the bigger barriers of getting to living shoreline installation, and maintenance and monitoring. And this next slide, let me see, we'll give you, oh, there it goes. Gives you some ideas of what we do. Of course, we have lectures, some of those group exercises. It's really, not only is it a great co-educational space for professionals, we do get homeowners in there too as well, but we also have a very consistent representation from local governments. So either they're trying to get their staff, we had a number of local government representation from their natural resources and resiliency departments. So trying to get a handle or get some background knowledge on living shorelines, because they're the ones that may be providing local regulations and permits to the contractors and the homeowners that might be interested in living shorelines. And then of course, NGOs, and occasionally some waterfront homeowners. So it's really this nice space where people can get together and learn together. But even better, I think, is the interaction between the different audiences. So with in-class work, we also do some site visits at different living shorelines in the vicinity of where we're having the course. So it's very locally based because every situation is different. The conditions, the types of habitats or types of plant species you might use in the Panhandle are going to be very different from the ones you use in Miami or where I am in Martin County. So we work with local experts as well as the state and federal staff that are local to that area. And so far, we had a grant from DEP to fund teaching this course in about 12 locations throughout the state. And this is where we're at right now, where we just completed those last year. And we are continuing this work. We've got some funding coming online from EPA. So hopefully we'll be able to continue teaching the courses and filling in the gaps of counties that we have not yet reached. So I wish I had that information for you in this presentation, but we're still waiting on the funding to be activated and so that we can get started and start planning courses. But please keep, I'll send as we get that information, as that gets updated, I'll share that information with the FFL program so that they know, so you can all learn and hopefully take the course. But this gives you an idea. I mentioned a little bit of the makeup of our audience for this course, and this is what it looks like. We've got about equal representation between local governments and sometimes state as well, because DEP will send their staff as new staff to take this course, especially if they're going to be involved in permitting. It gives them a leg up on what's going on, and then also meeting some of the contractors. So even though the pie chart sort of breaks down the types of private sector, but when you add that all up, it's about 40% represented by the private sector, and the rest of it about nonprofits, community groups, a little smattering of some academia in there as well. We survey those participants, so you can see some knowledge gain there. It's somewhat moderate in terms of knowledge gain, but what we're finding is that a lot of our participants are fairly well versed or have some good knowledge to begin with. And I'll show you in the next slide some of the examples of the practice change that we're hoping that increases over time. But one thing I want to note too is that we do offer CEUs, and we've offered CEUs from some of the same organizations that you're getting CEUs from for this webinar. The FNGLA has been very, very generous with CEUs for taking this course. So I think they've given like 6 CEUs for completing this course, which is fantastic. They've been wonderful to work with, because we really want to increase the landscape professionals, because they're a big part of can play a big role in the activities related to living shorelines. We get a lot of environmental consultants, marine construction, but we're still kind of missing that consistent element of the landscape industry, which I personally really like to see change. But this is kind of where we're at with there's 2 different venues for people to learn about living shorelines. We have the professional course, which I just described. At this point in time, we've taught about 17 courses, getting close to 350 graduates, 343. And along with that, this got started several years before, but the Florida Master Naturalist Program teaches a course on coastal shoreline restoration. And I've been involved in teaching that in my area for the last several years with other extension agents. And what's great about these 2 courses is I feel like they're very complementary. So we have the professional course for contractors to train industry on the ins and outs of living shorelines. And the Master Naturalist course really serves to educate our public, and hopefully, ideally, these are also homeowners that might live on the water. So those 2 courses together really provides this great opportunity for the 2 major audiences, contractors and homeowners, to be well versed and educated in what living shorelines are all about. And we are, at least with regards to the contractors course, we are starting to see some evidence of behavior change. Some of the businesses that have taken the course are increasing the amount of clients that they're meeting with to potentially talk about installing living shorelines, site assessments. All these are steps towards a living shoreline. So hopefully we're going to see that change over time, and sort of get to that living shoreline nirvana that I mentioned earlier. And that's the role that I'm playing along with my colleagues as an extension agent, is facilitating those connections so that we can get to that goal of nature-based solutions for coastal resiliency. And connecting homeowners and professionals. This is an example of a living shoreline in my area, which I'll get to in a second. But a lot of homeowners, the steps are kind of unclear. So we're trying to provide more educational materials for our waterfront homeowners. The Master Naturalist course is a great way to reach those people. Those images that I showed you earlier of the nature-based living shorelines versus the hybrid living shorelines. That's actually an image from a couple of images from a book that I'm putting together with Savannah Berry and a couple other co-authors to essentially serve as a guide for homeowners in Florida on how to get to a living shoreline. So we're hoping that that book becomes another educational piece that can not only be used by homeowners, but also by the contractors sharing that information in that book with potential clients. And one of the things we talk about in that book is that roadmap to a living shoreline. And really, that the key thing here is one, defining what you want. Is the primary goal to protect the shoreline? In most cases, it is. Occasionally, we'll have homeowners that really want to do something good for the environment, and they want to see. I've worked with a homeowner in my county, in Martin County. He was worried about coastal flooding from king tides, and he really liked enjoying. He kayaks. He really liked enjoying seeing wildlife along his waterfront. So those could be some of the goals. And really another important part is assembling that team, that those three elements of the waterfront homeowner, the contractor, the local experts that might be more well versed in living shorelines, getting those experts together to be able to help plan that project, perform the site assessments and the project design necessary so that when you visit your state and federal and local regulators, you've got a nice plan in place, and that will hopefully ensure that that permit application process is as streamlined as possible, because permitting is a major barrier in terms of the timeline of getting living shorelines started and installed. But that one example of that, where it is a nice example of this living shoreline team, is a homeowner location in Sewell's Point, which is here in Martin County. It's a small town here in Martin County on the coast. A homeowner really, her goals were to do something good for the environment. She lived on the St. Lucie River, where she'd experienced, as many riverfront homeowners experienced, Lake Okeechobee discharges and the drastic water quality impacts that came with that. She wanted to do something that was benefiting the water. So she had worked with a landscape architect. She already had a landscaper that she had worked with on other projects in her upland portions of her landscape. And myself, in this case, when I was working for a nonprofit, local nonprofit, prior to coming to IFAS. So we were able to create a nice design for that living shoreline project. The landscape architect worked on land down to the water's edge, and then I worked on creating the oyster reefs, designing and creating the oyster reefs that will help protect those plantings. So that's another good example of a small scale waterfront homeowner living shoreline, where sort of a unique team of traditional landscape professionals, an architect, a landscaper, and a marine scientist came together to create this project. And it's still going strong to this day. This was back in 2000. I think it started in 2016. Another small scale living shoreline, and this is a commercial property, a small local hotel in Martin County. Again, they were interested in not only doing something good for the lagoon, the Indian River Lagoon, but they had experienced a lot of historical erosion over the years. And so we had constructed some small oyster reefs, and then came back and planted marsh grass. And this is kind of a little bit of the after photos here, where you can see the growth of those initial plugs of marsh grass now starting to grow waterward into the oyster reefs that were originally installed. And so it's actually turned out quite nice for this project. It's actually one of our most successful small scale projects in our area. And a big reason why I'm here too is to not only provide some more information about what living shorelines are all about, but also to sort of draw that connection between what I do as an extension agent and as a marine scientist in living shorelines. And hopefully you can see that there are a lot of opportunities to be involved in living shorelines. A lot of the goals of living shorelines align with some specific goals for in Florida friendly landscaping. Of course, you've got to have the right plant and right place. Most of the plants that we use are it's an even simpler palette to work with when you're right at the water's edge. It's either going to be marsh vegetation or things like mangroves. So that right plant, right place. The main ones are highlighted in yellow. Attracting wildlife, creating habitat for that coastal wildlife, and addressing water quality issues like reducing stormwater runoff and protecting that waterfront. And even things that are maybe not as obvious for us as marine scientists, but even things like fertilizing appropriately, because really you don't need to fertilize at all with a lot of this vegetation. And that goes along, that aligns well with water efficiently, because once you get those plants, at least that are right at the water's edge, you really don't need to be watered at all, because they're utilizing salt water to grow. And a lot of that work is already being done by and fits well within that Florida friendly landscaping model. This is an example, again, where what I know is in Martin County. This is what we called a buffered shoreline. And a local nonprofit, Orca, worked with IFAS Extension and the city of Stuart to create this, what I think is a really beautiful area of native plants. And the whole idea with this buffered shoreline concept is that it's above the high tide line, so it's not it's not exposed to tidal inundation. But the idea is that this is strictly for water quality and, of course, beautification. But the idea is that stormwater is being stormwater runoff is being interrupted by this vegetation and helping improve water quality. And again, you can see this. It's a public park right on the water. And another example here, the photo on the right is an HOA. And so you could see the water, the river in the background. This area here, those are all trim mangroves, legally trimmed mangroves. I just want to add that in. And most of this right here is where the landscaping has occurred. So this idea of these buffered shorelines are already fit within that Florida friendly landscaping model, and boosted and informed by a lot of extensive existing expertise in both the science at IFAS and industry, with a lot of people such as yourselves that are in the audience. And I feel like this is kind of where there's that borderline where work that I'm doing is below mean high water, below the average high tide line. And a project like this is largely performed above the high tide line. I think that's where a lot of that collaboration is where right in that transition zone is where we're right for collaboration. And the one thing to keep in mind is, I mentioned, I didn't get into the weeds on permitting because it is pretty extensive but no federal or state permits are necessary when you're working above that mean high water line. So it's only local permits that might be required by the city or county that that project is being performed in. And of course, the permission of the homeowner or the property owner. So I think there's a high potential for collaboration between landscape and marine and habitat, marine construction professionals really in this zone here as a marine construction or marine habitat restoration person might stop at that mean high water mark and get this required state and federal permits to work in the water. A landscape professional can work here too, and I just think there's just a lot of opportunity there for collaboration. So where do we go from here? The recognition of nature-based solutions for protecting our shorelines is growing. We're seeing it more and more. We have devoted professionals that have been working in parallel, separated by tidal zones. So, and hopefully that's changing, because I think that I think we're going to be forced to change. Those areas that are at or above the mean high water line are getting inundated regularly now with extreme high tides and storms. So I think the time is right. The opportunities are there for education and professional training. And I hope that this is a cue that these are opportunities that we can all work together in this unique tidal zone area. And the only thing is, I'll keep an eye out for some of the opportunities to take this course or the Florida Master Naturalist course. There's actually a Florida Master Naturalist course in coastal shoreline restoration starting this week in Cedar Key, taught by Savannah Berry and some of her other colleagues. So I think it's the perfect time to start working together, and conditions are dictating that, I feel. So in closing, I'd like to acknowledge a lot of the partners that have been working together for the contractors course, all represented by all the logos here. We regularly have state and federal staff come teach the permitting sections of these courses. We have local governments teach, if they teach the course as well, if they have local permit regulations that will impact living shorelines. And then, of course, the team of experts that we have at Sea Grant, FWC, and some of the nonprofits that we work with. So and the university. So it's been a great experience working with all these professionals to help teach these courses. And it's been a fantastic opportunity for networking, learning about a lot of the contractors that take the course. They get FaceTime with the people they'll be interacting with when it comes to permitting. So it's been a fantastic experience teaching this class. These are some of the individuals that have helped create the course way back in starting in 2018 and then finalizing it in 2019. And so we just want to recognize those individuals as well, and the agencies that they represent. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Encomio, for a wonderful presentation on seascaping. We do have time for a few questions, and we do have quite a few questions in the Q&A section here. So one of the first questions is, who can residents contact if they are concerned of declining water levels and quality with negative effects on local wildlife?
So I'm going to write it in the chat. I think I actually have it here, but on that second web page, floridalivingshorelines.com, we have lists of local experts by region, whether you're in the Panhandle, the Northeast, the Southeast, East Central Florida, Southwest. And a lot of those are our local extension agents, some of them Sea Grant agents. Some of them are local experts from nonprofits or government agencies. And if you visit that site, you can find who some of those experts are in your region, and those could be people that could help you and sort of start that process of moving towards a potential nature-based solution.
Thank you for so much for that response. The next question is, will living shorelines along seawalls prevent fertilizer and pesticides from washing down into the water? And how about soil loss? Can it be prevented?
Yes, because what happens a lot with, if you've got, especially if it's a brackish or saltwater water body that you're adjacent to, what I've seen is that if they have turf grass all the way to the edge and they don't have the appropriate saltwater tolerant vegetation along that coastal fringe, like mangroves or salt marsh type vegetation, what happens is you not only get the waves and the tidal action that can cause erosion, but that turf grass is not adapted to that salt water. So you not only get the erosion, but you get that saltwater inundation that prevents that grass from performing its original intended function of stabilizing that soil. So it really is important to have that's that right place, right plant, right place concept, right? So it is really important to have that appropriate saltwater tolerant vegetation right at that interface. And they will, so that like things like mangroves, salt marsh vegetation will help stabilize that soil.
Thank you, Dr. Encomio. The next question is, are living shorelines important for freshwater retention ponds also,
Oh,
such as
wow.
lakes, creeks, and rivers?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we get that question a lot. And I would say, just like buffered shorelines are kind of that cousin of living shoreline because it's above the mean high water, I would place pond vegetation and that kind of work as kind of a separate category as well. And I'm definitely less well versed in that area. I'm hoping to become more well versed in that area when that Healthy Ponds program comes out to train the trainers. I'm hoping to take that. It's definitely analogous, but when we use the term living shorelines, we're mostly talking about tidal waters. So brackish, it could be near freshwater or close to freshwater, but it's still tidal as opposed to an enclosed water body. But almost I think an entire other discipline that really needs a lot of attention in Florida, for sure.
Thank you so much for that response. And then we can take another question. Why are rocks considered living shorelines and not hardened shoreline?
Yeah, that's a good, I think we're still, kind of working with those definitions. I think when we think of rock as still a natural material versus concrete, and ideally, especially at the right salinities that can favor settlement by marine organisms, that becomes the foundation for things that truly are nature-based, like oyster reefs or mussel beds or any of the seaweed that might attach their holdfast to those rocks. So but you're right to ask that question. There can be a little bit of gray area, but I think we're right now working with, okay, if it's a natural element, like a plant or a rock that is a natural rock, we're still considering that a natural or nature-based element versus, say, concrete. But you're right. You're right to ask that question because it is kind of it can be a little bit fuzzy on that definition.
Very good. Thank you so much. And then we have another question here. Are there any companion projects that can be used to benefit inland water features such as detention or retention basins?
Well, I think that might relate to that earlier question about ponds. There's some great examples of stormwater projects that are created not to address stormwater or water quality issues, but at the same time providing habitat for those particular locations. We had one here in Martin County, which is fantastic. It just won a Native Plant Society award. It was a series of stormwater features that actually connect from upland all the way to the tidal river, and each of those are stormwater retention or detention ponds that are planted with native or at least Florida friendly vegetation, and they really basically turned it into a stormwater park. I think Gainesville, there's this nice stormwater park there as well, which serves as a great example of what, and those all fit under that umbrella of nature-based solutions. Just to point out, living shorelines are one nature-based solution out of many. And this idea of utilizing stormwater features, but making them ecologically functional, and not only ecologically functional, but aesthetically pleasing as well, also fits within under that umbrella of a nature-based solution. I hope
Thank
that
you so
answers the
much.
question.
Thank you so much for that response. And I think it was very, very thorough. So hopefully we did answer that question. With that, we are wrapping up with the final two questions now.
Okay.
Does individual homeowners require a permit to plant mangroves?
Well, I will say, if you are doing anything above mean high water, meaning the average high tide line, that is your property. Meaning above mean high water, meaning from that mean high tide, the average high tide line, and then moving landward. So moving towards the upland. In most cases, you are not required, certainly not required to have a state or federal permit. And practically speaking, from a habitat restoration, as a habitat restoration method for mangroves, we always recommend planting just above that mean high water mark. And so a lot of mangrove restoration projects that were performed by some of our local nonprofits here in Southeast Florida, they performed those plantings above mean high water, and they were not required to get state and federal permits because they were above tidal waters. So if you were planting below mean high water, then yeah, you would have to get that sovereign submerged land. It's owned by the state. You would have to get a state and federal permit to install anything in that area. But practically speaking, we're always recommending, if we're doing mangrove restoration, we start just above that high tide line. And the idea is that those mangroves will then grow out, and as they hopefully survive and mature and start stabilizing the sediment and soil around it.
Thank you so much for that response. With that, we have the final summative question. It's a two-part question, actually. It's, can you provide a link for the contractor's course, and when will your book be available?
So thank you for that. I would visit the Florida Sea Grant website that I've got displayed up there, or the floridalivingshorelines.com website. And any updates to our course offerings for 2025 and beyond will be posted there in both those two venues. So keep an eye on that. We're actually also in the midst of revamping that floridalivingshorelines.com website. So hopefully it'll be a lot nicer looking as after June of 2025. And the book, yes, the book, we have written the draft. It's been peer reviewed. We've revised it. We're going through the images and those are getting revised now. That book will be out in, is slated to be out in October of this year. So apologize for that wait.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vincent Encomio. With that, this is the end of the question list. Thank you so much for being here and presenting this wonderful segment for on behalf of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And
Yeah,
thank you,
thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Mark, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Oh, the other thing is I'm going to type my email in the chat. So if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me. Let me get that in there. Okay.
Thank you. And as Dr. Encomio is adding that email in the chat, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, everyone for being a part of this webinar. And we are looking forward to seeing you hopefully at the next webinar scheduled in March. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
All right. And Dr. Encomio, if you have any last minute things you want to mention, please feel free to do so now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the only thing is, I hope that this gives a good overview and background on what living shorelines are all about and the work that we're doing to encourage behavior change in that area. And if you're a professional in the landscaping industry, we need you. We really think I feel like that's an important private sector enterprise that needs to be engaged in living shorelines.
Fantastic.